you know, we weren't going to get him reacting the way that it should be. So we had set up this scene where there was supposed to be a kid in the classroom who hears about Baxter's effect and gets excited and wants to burn the plant to prove it for himself. And we actually had a plant hooked up to the polygraph, and we have a graph of it and everything. And in between takes, it was very tense on set. We were under a very tight time schedule, and there was a problem with this little camera that we had over the polygraph that was supposed to be able to show us the needle's movement, and it wasn't working. And our director was getting really angry at the guy who was trying to set up the camera because it wasn't working. And I noticed that as the tension in the room got really extreme from this camera problem, that the plant was having a very strong reaction. I'm watching the needles going like this. I'm like, wow. This, you know, I mean, I knew it was real, but still, when you see it yourself, it's kind of like the difference between somebody believing in UFOs and somebody seeing a UFO land in your backyard. It was like, okay, that's really happening. So now we have the situation where Baxter is there, and he's not reading lines. He's basically just improvising, which created a lot of trouble in the editing room. And we needed to get the plant to react in a way that was authentic. So I finally got this idea in my mind that I would, at the exact moment in the scene where the kid gets up out of the chair and is going to threaten to burn the plant, my part in that scene is that I'm supposed to try to stop him. I put my hand on his chest and basically push him back. And I said, I'm just going to conjure up the ugliest, darkest, most vile, heinous, horrible emotions that I can think of and just focus them all on that plant. Just and I didn't want to have it show on my face because it wouldn't be appropriate for the shot, but I wanted to get like nervous and have my heart suddenly race. And so we did the shot. The kid gets up to light the plant on fire, and I just blasted this plant with this bolt of very nasty energy, and the plant went crazy. And Baxter is like, "Oh, we got a reaction there," and that was so gratifying because it proved that this is real. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because Baxter proved this not just with plants. He proved it with bacteria. He proved it with single cells. He proved it with human cells. Dr. Brian O'Leary, NASA astronaut, actually gave him a skin sample from the inside of his mouth, and they put it in a tiny little test tube with gold wires, and then sent O'Leary off to the airport. And O'Leary, they synchronized watches, and O'Leary would write down every time something stressful happened to him, like, oh my God, I missed my turn on the thruway or the freeway or wherever. I guess it would have been the freeway because this was California. Thruway is an upstate New York thing. So anyway, O'Leary is writing down every time that he has a stressful event. Well, sure enough, here's his living cells 300 miles away in the lab, and every single time he had a stressful event, his cells were showing a reaction. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what happens if two people's cells come together to make a child? Like the parent-child psychic connection, right? Then you say, well, okay, is it only cells that are from your own body or near to your own body? We actually know that it's not that way. Plants respond to other organisms dying. They don't just respond to threats of their own. You can get a plant to respond to the death of brine shrimp. That was one of Baxter's famous experiments, where he randomly dumped brine shrimp, living brine shrimp, into boiling water, and it would kill them, and as long as nobody else was in the building, the plant would react to the death of the shrimp.
So where are you going with it?
The fact is that when we're seeing evolution occur in these 62 million year periods, it's a function of the actual field of consciousness itself changing. In other words, biology is affected by the field, the way we think is affected by the field, and now that we're heading towards 2012, it's not so much that time is speeding up where you're going to look at a clock and the hands are going to move faster. In a Newtonian model, you have particles that are sitting there in empty space and they shouldn't have any interaction with each other. Yet when we are in alignment, when we're aligned with the galactic center, so that if you're standing on the Earth and the Earth is rotating and your body is on the surface of the Earth, And as the Earth spins, your position of the galactic center spins. And if there's the galactic center, as I turn and face it, my psychic ability increases so much. It's like there's this river of energy coming from the center of the galaxy. So what that ultimately suggests is that our position in the galaxy does have an effect on our cognitive function, on our thinking. It also gives a strong support to this idea that evolution could be created as a result of a position in the galaxy. Why do you have these 62 million year cycles? In order to really understand how this science works, you have to think in terms of fractals. And what fractal means is that it's actually a term derived from taking an imaginary number, which is the square root of -1, and chunking it through a very simple operation, a little equation. And then you take the product of that and you run it through again, and you take the product and you run it through again. So if you've ever seen like a paisley shirt and it has these kind of flowering patterns, that's what the fractal pattern basically looks like. Now, the thing about a fractal is that you can zoom in on it, and the farther in you go, you keep seeing the same pattern appear again.
Like the Mandelbrot set.
Like the Mandelbrot set, exactly. Now, a lot of the crop formations have had fractal patterns. Actually, there was a very interesting case where a team of crop circle researchers was saying, wouldn't it be interesting if the Mandelbrot set showed up in the crops, and the next day it was there. So that was obviously pretty amazing. The fractal principle is important because you have an energy system within an atom, which in some degree is similar to the energy system within the solar system, which in some degree is similar to the energy system within the galaxy. And even the galaxies all have an orbit around a universal center as well. And that has been determined by research from Russia by Dr. A.M. Mishin, M-I-S-H-I-N. So in the solar system, there is a cycle that at first was believed to only affect the Earth. It's a slow wobbling of the Earth's axis called precession. It takes 26,000 years to complete, roughly speaking. The idea being that these walls of energy expand away from the center of the galaxy like ripples on a pond, and there is a discrete boundary like oil and water that we hit in 2012. And that's the most basic level of the model. Now, when you want to go into more detail, it gets into